shaped by a lot of different forces. We're shaped by the country that we're born into and the community that we grow up in. We're shaped by the attitudes of our parents and sometimes subtle ways, sometimes unintentional ways that we're parented and that we learn to grow up. Many forces in our life. Our faith is one of those forces. And today, let's think about the people who've had a program for our lives and people who've put a plan in place for the kind of person that they hope we would be. Last week we had a great story about the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, and I encourage you to look at your shoes for a little bit. Remember that? Think about your shoes. Think about where you've been in those shoes. Think about where you want to go in those shoes. Think about how those shoes represent you. Well, today I want to take you on another journey into your inner self. And today, Jesus said, I am the gate of the sheep. What I want you to do today is I want you to think about the house that you grew up in. Now, I know many of you grew up in many different houses, maybe different places, but think about the first image that came into your mind when I said that. The place that you most identify as your home with your parents when you were a child. Think about that place. Think about the street that you lived on. Think about your neighbors. Now, I want you to draw your attention to the front door, the gate of the house. And I want you to imagine in your mind what that door looked like. Now, I know you can do it because those images are indelible in our minds. So think about that doorway into your home. As you imagine it, when you open that door and you enter in, where do you expect to find your mother? You smell the cookies? Rhubarb pie? Candy? Maybe? You hear the sounds? Do you remember what her voice sounded like? What she said to you when you came in through that door? That gate? Can you remember those things? Can you go back to that time? Like Jesus said, your home is a place where you are accepted for who you are and you're safe. And you come in, and you go out, and you enjoy abundant life. There's something about the image of a gate. There's something about the image of a door that has a deep meaning in our souls. In the Gospel of John, 24 times Jesus uses that little phrase, I am. Today he says, I am the gate of the sheep. And then he says, I am the good shepherd. And if you think about that, that's the way that we understand who Jesus is. Jesus is the good shepherd. And we get to the good shepherd by going through the gate. Think about times when you haven't been able to get through the gate. Think about sporting events or entertainment events. They call it the gate. And it makes a big difference whether you get in or not. And they always make a big deal about what the gate looks like. If you've ever been to Disney World, you open it up and there's a road and it goes right to the Magic Castle, right? It's the gate into a different world. Ancient cities, it probably was a pretty serious thing if an enemy was coming and you ran to the city and they'd already closed the gate. And that was the world that Jesus lived in. What would happen to a sheep that didn't get into the gate? And how would the shepherd be concerned about going to search for that sheep that wasn't in the place of safety? We can imagine all sorts of things about what Jesus meant by that door and that gate. But we do this in our culture too, don't we? I lived in St. that looks like a gateway where you walk through it. San Francisco has the Golden Gate Bridge. It's passage into the Pacific Ocean. How many of you have ever locked yourselves out of your own house? It happens, right? It happens. I want to get through the gate. I want to get through the door. And in order to get in, like Jesus said, we might even break a window. Or some of us have little secrets about how to get in our house if that terrible thing happens. Even in ancient religion, they have the pyramids that appear to be used as a form of initiation. And as you progressed spiritually, you were allowed deeper into the pyramids. This is probably the way the temple and the Holy of Holies functioned in the same way in ancient Israel. And once you go beyond that point, you will never be the same again. We all get our information about politics and religion from cartoons, right? And what do the cartoons always show about heaven? It's a gate, right? It's a pearly gate, or it's a golden gate. We all know the story. There's a guy named St. Peter standing there, and he's got a key to the gate. And then there are all sorts of bad jokes about Bill Gates and the Pope and taxi drivers and lawyers and Bill Clinton going to the gate, because we know psychologically there's something about that means we're passing into a new way of living. And in Revelation chapter 3, Jesus says to the church, I have placed before you an open door that no man can shut. The experience of another person loving us is an open door that no one can shut. And we all need that place of safety. We all need that foundation for our lives, that place we can go where God's door is always open. And the church has to model that gate that has a program and a plan to keep the world safe. God has a program in the life of Jesus. And a program for us to celebrate and embrace God's love, as we say here at Trinity. And there are some times, because we're human, we fail to celebrate. There are some times we fail to embrace. But Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount talked about the gate. And that gate that you can go through, that leads to a different life, is the gate of compassion. The gate of generosity. The gate of connection with God. The gate of your calling and your purpose in life. The gate of God's love. Now, it's over 500 times in the Bible, more than any other animal, that the Bible uses the word for sheep. 500 times. And we can draw different conclusions for that. There are different metaphors for the way people are like sheep. But like humans, sheep have selective hearing. Nobody here, none of us here have selective hearing. Like humans, we lack direction. And I'm glad that the word aimlessness made it into our UCC statement of faith. Because probably that definition is better than any other for what happens to us. As we go in life and we lose our program and we lose our plan for aimlessness. Maybe that's why sheep are listed 500 times in the Bible. But the other thing is, the shepherd's voice is the only thing that a sheep needs to know. And each one of us develops our sense of that voice over time. The voice of benevolence, the voice of love, joy, hope, peace, the voice that tells us in this world that we live in, we must hunger for justice and righteousness. And once you experience that voice, and once you know the value of safety and a sense of calling, you can never shut that door. You can never go back. So today, our shepherd image, this is the very nature of God. This is how we know who Jesus is. This is how we have direction for our own life, for the life of the church. And when we discover the nature of God, we discover ourselves. In the 10th chapter of John, the Spirit watches over us. The Spirit looks out for us. The Spirit guides us. And even when you lose faith in your own power, there's a power that can lift you. There's still a power out there that's working for your good. No matter where you are, or who you are, or where you are on life's journey. They say that the only way that people can change is if something from outside the system is introduced. Because we kind of go along in aimlessness, because we kind of go along in the things that we've learned, and the way we use things. For those of you today who are celebrating with your families, having a child produces change. You become to realize where you come from, the nature of humanity, how fragile life is, how responsible we are for the world, and how, in some way, we are connected to every person. And our children learn that there is one other person who cares about them. God is outside all human systems.